Hey Adam, I love you so much. You very casually mentioned today that I haven't told you about the books I've been reading this summer, so I thought it could be pretty fun to go through them. I've already filmed this video, but I was very foolish and I didn't test the audio beforehand, and the one time I don't double record the audio, it didn't record any audio. And so I had filmed for 30 minutes. And it didn't do anything! What I have here is my book Maury. It's what I've been reading for the last several weeks this summer. I am trying to read 50 books by the end of the year. I'm about halfway through that goal. June and May were not good months for me. I was very, very stressed. I did not read as much as I wanted to, but now we're back. So this is the books that I've read in July and August so far. The very first book that I have finished this summer was The World According to Colory. The World According to Color, A Cultural History. It is by James Fox. I think this is a fabulous book. It was a book that Adam and I read for our book club. He read it a few months ago. I've just gotten around to finishing it this July. All of the colors have little paintings, as you can see. He talks about black, red, yellow, blue, white, purple, green. He kind of goes through like the socio-political history of not only the colors, but things that they might be associated with. Green talks about not only the art, but also talks about nature. Red talks only not about the art, but kind of about blood and different cultures that kind of used it as like a good thing versus a bad thing. So he goes through a lot of those. A thing that I really appreciated about this book is he talks a lot about race. And not only does it kind of talk about lots of different parts of history, I think it does a really good job condensing it from like the start of humanity to modern day. It is a really brilliant book. I believe I rated it a whole 5 stars. As a fiction girly, I really appreciated the book being, it was quick and concise, but also really fascinating. He has a really strong voice in the book that made it really interesting, and it taught me a lot and was very educational. So I loved that book. I believe Adam liked it as well. The very next book I read after that was The Lion Woman of Tehran. My wonderful friend Nia, they gave this to me, I want to say in March, but I was kind of going through a lot of personal stuff in March that hit too close to home in reading this book. The Lion Woman of Tehran follows 2 young women, Ellie and Homa, in Tehran. It starts from the 1950s and then works up to kind of present day, a little bit in America, but mostly in Iran. It's absolutely brilliant. It is a gorgeous book. It reads very quick paced, and it mainly focuses on the friendship between the 2 women in the novel, kind of watches them grow up a bit. One of our characters is a part of the revolution, and one of the characters is kind of sitting to the side a little bit. It follows lots of trials and tribulations that can happen in any female friendship, but it also talks a lot about the history of Iran and Tehran and kind of the history of the feminist movements in those areas. I think it does a really beautiful job of introducing the history to new readers. I found it really fascinating. I think a lot of people would enjoy the book. It took me a while to get into it because I was going through my own things, but everyone I know said that they read it like within a few days. It's had great reception. Definitely recommend that book to anyone interested. The next book I read is American Dirt. I know that there's some controversy with American Dirt, and I think it's because, and I kind of could tell when I was reading the book, that she does not speak Spanish or she's not Mexican, the author of the book. And the reason I could tell this in the writing, this was kind of my one critique when I was reading the book, you can tell when an author is writing the character as a bilingual baddie, but they aren't actually bilingual themselves. And I think there were a lot of points in the book where I was like, that is not how I think that would go down. Oh, I accidentally slipped into another language. When actually I think it's much more of like, you kind of forget some words in your language and jump in between the 2 languages at a much more inconsistent pace than they did it in this book. American Dirt follows a mother and her son escaping from Mexico after her entire family is killed by a gang that's active in the city that they live in. The kind of gag of the book, though, is that she knows the leader of the gang personally, and her husband is a reporter who puts out an investigative piece on this individual, which is why her family is horrifically killed, and she's kind of running away from a good friend of hers. Potentially could have been more in different circumstances. It is definitely a graphic read. It's not overly descriptive, I would say. I think a lot of people should read it. Reading the book definitely caught me when I was already particularly anxious, and it left me feeling a little bit sick to my stomach every time I put the book down. I would read it all in one go. It's very anxiety inducing. It is very, very well written. Some of the more graphic parts were in relation to some of the younger girls in their kind of story in the novel. Definitely the descriptions of lots of the killings is very intense and hard to read. I never had to put the book down because it wasn't too intense, but when I did put the book down, it made me incredibly anxious. Additionally, when they get to crossing the border and going with the coyote into the United States, it's very intense. There's lots of layers to the book. I think the thing that I was left slightly disappointed by is that the gang, like, it is kind of resolved, the gang member, but it gets to the point a little bit in the book where I was like, I don't know why they needed to have a personal relationship to this guy that ran the gang. I don't know if it was setting it up for a second book. The way that it ended, I was just kind of like, oh, I didn't understand the need for it. But maybe somebody else didn't really enjoy that part of the book. So yeah, I only rated it about 3 stars, but it still was a very, very good book. I think it's important for everybody to read, particularly anyone living in the United States. I think there's a really unfortunate rise of anti-immigration that's taking place in a lot of countries right now. I think it's really gross. Moving right along. And as a preface to this book, my friend bought the book and they brought it into their house, they read the book, and a lot of the book has to do with like synchronicities, kind of odd things happening and them kind of having this much grander meaning. And they then had 2 books in their house, and them and their roommate didn't buy it. They were just kind of like, oh, why is there suddenly 2 copies of this book? They gave me one. Thank you, Stefan. I love you. And it's Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, translated by Anton Her. It was a really phenomenal book. I started this book in Canada when Adam and I went on a road trip with my friend Katie, and I read the very first chapter. It's a series of short stories, kind of sci-fi, kind of grotesque horror. And the very first book follows a woman whose defecation kind of turns into a monster that stalks her for a large part of her life. And when she finally deals with it, it's too late, and then this monster takes over her life and puts her in the toilet. Really, really good. I think a lot of the stories kind of have those like little hidden meanings in the grotesqueness of it all. One of the ones I can't stop thinking about was about a man who coded bots his entire life and kind of built bots and was a part of the movement of these like bot helpers in the house. And the more close he got to this one bot, like the sadder he was to let it go when it got to the end of its life. And when she reached the end of her life, because he could no longer update the system, it took over the other bots in his house and they killed him. And it was really cool and I think very fitting to the modern day. I loved Cursed Bunny. I thought it was really interesting. All the short stories I read through very quickly because I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. The next book I read was the next day. I read The House on Mango Street. I think it's like it's a pretty popular American book. I didn't read it as a kid. I know a lot of people read it and loved it as a kid. I did not like it. I think it is about oppression, race, and kind of lower income areas. I think I read it really, really quickly. I think as a kid I probably would have loved it, but I read it within an hour and I didn't really like it. I think it just probably is not made for somebody my age, but probably for somebody much younger. They would have loved it. The next book I read, I've had this play for years and years and years of my life. It is called The Goat, or Who is Sylvia? It is written by Edward Albee, an amazing American playwright, and in 2002 it won the Tony Award for Best Play. I absolutely adore this play. I think it's really interesting, but I finally sat down to read it properly. The story is an odd one. You definitely have to kind of bear with me for this one. It is about Martin and Stevie. They're a married couple and Martin has a secret. They're kind of laughing about the absurdity of affairs at the beginning of the book. Stevie is then given a letter by their mutual best friend explaining that Martin was in fact having an affair, and it is with a goat named Sylvia. Crazy. I'm gonna read one of my favorite monologues from anything ever to all my drama baddies out there. Please use this as an audition monologue. When I am playing the right age, I certainly am going to. This is her running into Martin right after she found out what he has done. Do you know what I thought? What I thought after I read the letter right to the end? Well, I laughed, of course. A grim joke, but an awfully funny one. You know, that Ross, I tell you, that Ross. You go too far, Ross. It's funny. And it's awful way, but it's way overboard, Ross. So I shook my head and I laughed at the awfulness of it. The absurdity, the awfulness. Some things are so awful, you have to laugh. And then I listened to myself laughing, and I began to wonder why I was laughing. Again, it's not funny when you come right down to it, Ross. Why was I laughing? And just like that, I stopped. I stopped laughing, and I realized, probably in the way if you suddenly fell off a building. Oh shit. I've fallen off a building and I'm going to die. I'm gonna go splat on the sidewalk like that. That it wasn't a joke at all. It was awful and absurd, but it wasn't a joke. And everything tied in. Ross coming here to interview you yesterday, the funny smell, the Noel Coward bit we did about you having an affair, and with a goat. You said it right out. And I laughed. I mean, you told me, you came right out and you fucking told me, and I laughed, and I made jokes about going to the feed store, and I laughed. I fucking laughed. Until it stopped. Until the laughter stopped. Until it all came together, Ross's letter, and all the rest, that odd smell, the mistress's perfume on you, and so I knew. Shut up. And so I knew. And next, of course, came believing it. Knowing it. Knowing it's true is one thing, but believing what you know, well, that's the tough part. We all prepare for jolts along the way, disturbances of the peace, the lies, the evasions, the infidelities, if they happen. I've never had an affair, by the way, all our years together, not even with a cat or anything. We prepare for things, for lessonings, even inevitable lessonings, and we think we can handle everything, whatever comes along, but we don't, do we? Do we? Fucking right we don't. Something can happen that's outside the rules, that doesn't relate to the way the game is played. Death before you're ready to even think about it, and that's the part of the game. A stroke that leaves you sitting, looking at an eggplant the week before had been your husband. That's another. Emotional disengagement, gradual, so gradual you don't even know it's happening, or sudden, not very often, but occasionally that's another. You've read about spouses, God, I hate the word spouses, who all of a sudden start wearing dresses, yours, or their own collection of wives gone dyke. But if there's one thing you don't put on your plate, no matter how exotic your tastes might be, is bestiality. So here's the thing about it that I find interesting is this play is obviously fucked. Like, it's obviously messed up. Hello? It's really wanting to focus. That's Hecate on the back, by the way. It's obviously messed up. The thing I think is really interesting is there's this kind of underlying tone of homophobia, and it is an intentional kind of underlying tone because we're talking a lot about sexuality, and the husband is really trying to justify his actions and being like, you don't understand, like, I loved her, like, this was like, she loves me, like, this is like it's not that I'm having sex with a goat, but like, this is love, like, there's love there. But then, so they have their son as well, who's also gay. And the dad at one point calls him the F slur. And the wife in that monologue says DYKE. What I find interesting is I think the homophobia is very casual. It kind of like slips under the bed. Like, I was reading that and I didn't expect that. But then there's like obviously large conversations about sexuality throughout the entire show. And his parents being very accepting, but then also calling him slurs. And then the son kind of dealing with the fact that his dad has done this as well. I think I need to analyze it a little bit further. A lot of the show is about sexuality, what we like and what we don't like, and what's accepted and not accepted, because they're very anti-bestiality and yet still slightly homophobic. I rated that one a good 4 stars. I just don't think it aged very well. But there's also a bit where the son like molests his father in a way and like tries to kiss him. Their friend walks in and he's like, what kind of weird thing are you running? And his dad is like, he's really confused. There's nothing abnormal about a son loving his father. It's crazy. It's insane. Definitely a good read. Brilliant monologue. My God. Love it. The next book that I read, one of the last books that I'm going to talk about, I've just finished it. I read Night by Elie Wiesel, or Elie Wiesel. It is a book about the Holocaust. In the introduction to the book, he talks about how it was translated into multiple different languages and how his kind of intention was to share the story so it doesn't happen again. And in the prologue, which is his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, he talks a little bit about that as well. I thought it was a really, really good book. It was graphic, but not too descriptive. It's very straight to the point about the things that happen. It's a quick read. It's a hard and difficult read, but I think because it's not too descriptive, it really balanced it out quite well. They use it a lot for education in the US, and he says that in the end in his speech. And I think it's a really, really good book for that purpose of remembering so it doesn't happen again. I have some of my favorite quotes from the book. This is the one I think is really, really important, particularly now because history keeps repeating itself because we're not learning from it. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. He spoke a little bit about in his speech at the end how any kind of oppression, large-scale oppression, he was very sensitive to, and he goes, obviously I have a connection to being Jewish and I will support Judaism, my people, because that's how I hold my trauma. But then he talks a little bit about all the other traumas taking place in the world and how important it is to take a stand against those. I read Man's Search for Meaning, which I think is absolutely brilliant, but that is more of a kind of look at how we survived and how particular people did. Its underlying thesis is that it was hope. And I think what was different about this one is there was no greater meaning to be pulled from it, except that he said, for the survivor who chooses to testify, it is clear his duty is to bear witness for the dead and for the living. To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time. His makes it very clear that he's really angry and frustrated and sad about these things, but because he survived, he feels he needs to tell the story and not let other people forget it. It's a difficult read. He briefly talks about religion in the book and how he used to be very, very religious, and then throughout his experience he kind of lost his faith. One of my favorite books I think I've read this year. I think it's going to be one of those books that the imagery really sticks with me for a very long time, and that was the last book that I've finished this summer. I have a few more books I'm going to talk about. I started reading Operation Paperclip. I got about 100 pages in. It is really interesting. I hated walking around with this symbol by Annie Jacobson, and I thought it was boring. The thing that I struggle with when I read nonfiction books is when it's just name, like fact. I thought it was going to be the rise into Nazi Germany, but it started at the end of Nazi Germany, and then it very quickly spoke about how the US took a bunch of these Nazi leaders and gave them citizenship so they could build the bombs here. It was really interesting, but it's difficult to read. The last book I want to talk about is a book that I've not finished yet. Sue me. I started this book yesterday. It's called So Far Gone. I'm almost done with it, and I think I'm gonna finish it tonight, maybe. So Far Gone is by Jess Walter. It's easily one of my favorite books I've read this year. It follows Reese Kinnick, who is an estranged grandfather, and the reason for this is because he punched his son-in-law, who is an alt-right conspiracy theorist, in the face. It's set in 2025, I believe, so it talks a little bit about both of the elections. It talks a little bit about COVID. I'm going to spoily doily that two of his grandkids, well, he has two grandkids, they show up on his front porch. He doesn't recognize them, but they said that their mom sent them to him because she's gone, and their stepdad left, or their father left. So he is kind of thrown into fatherhood again, and he starts reflecting on all the different things that led him into this position and why he's estranged and why he left and why he thought that was going to be the easier solution. He used to be kind of an environmental warrior baddie and a journalist, and he was very passionate about environmentalism, and it's kind of about his fear and going into hiding when this alt-right conspiracy theory Christian group started rising in the US. I've never read a book that has directly talked about that current trend in the US that's taking place. It talks about the impact that can have on smaller communities, not just on the large scale. It reminds me a lot about A Father's Fight, which I read at the beginning of 2025, I think. And The Father's Fight was about the Sandy Hook shooting, and one of the fathers who sued a YouTuber who had said that Sandy Hook wasn't real. It was really, really good, but it also talks about like alt-right conspiracy theory pipeline and how dangerous it is. But this is a work of fiction that does that, and I think they handle the topics really, really sensitively. His grandkids are like taken from him in a parking lot. He's beaten up by Armies of the Lord, which is like a Christian cult kind of vibe in this book. It is so well written, and the main character is likable, but also like he has messed up quite a lot. So I definitely recommend that book as well to anyone. I think everybody should read it, particularly people in America. Those are my book recs for August and July. I've been really on a reading kick. Other books I'm reading are for my course, so I will see you guys next month to talk a little bit about those readings for school. The next book that Adam and I are reading for our book club is Brave New World. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the books that we've already read. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more, let us know. And by that I mean, let me know, Adam. I love you. Yay! This is also unrelated. In the last video, but I didn't record this, as I was grabbing a book from my backpack. There was a honey explosion. Everything I had in my backpack was covered in honey, and now everything is just sat drying out. I'm gonna get into puppetry this year, I think.